Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. And once again, I'm in the studio with a live guest. Yes, today, returning to the studio after the great publication of his book, which is, of course, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, is Guy Anderson. Hello, Guy.
Hello, Richard. It's lovely to see you again.
Thank you for making the effort to come all the way from deepest, darkest Somerset, is
Devon.
it? Devon.
Yeah.
Deepest, darkest Devon, up here to my little abode on the south coast. It's lovely to have you here. And as you were having a visit, I thought, well, let's go in the studio and we'll just have a bit of a waffle, a nice conversation, conspiracy conversation about things. Now, the last time you were on, you were telling me about the book, that it had been published. Mm-hmm. It has been published, and you've sold quite a lot of copies already.
I have, approaching 1,400.
Fantastic.
Now, which is in 3 months.
And is this your first foray into writing?
It is. I've written for magazines in the past, but that was in a different life. But it's the first time I've written a book. And one hell of a learning curve.
Yes, I can imagine. And what you say you'd written for magazines. What sort of things in magazines?
Well, years ago, I used to own an importer of car alarms. So I wrote
car alarms.
Yeah,
right, okay.
yeah. So I worked on a TV show on MTV called Pimp My Ride.
I do remember hearing about. I didn't really watch much of MTV, but I do remember Pimp My Ride.
Yeah, so I ended up writing for a magazine called Max Power.
Which
was a big car magazine.
With all the women who were scantily dressed, as
That's
I remember. Because I've been on some gigs, actually, in which they turned up, like the car show. Yeah. And they were there handing out magazines and all those sort of things, as you can imagine. Mm. Oh, right.
Yeah, so I got into writing just as a guest writer. When they had people that wanted to know more about vehicle security, car crime in general. And so that was really my introduction to writing, something that other people en masse would read.
Right. Little did you know at the time then that you would be writing about history that is so different.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course this started out as just me putting all of my information and research down, so my children and their children and their children had something that they could read, and something that may be of use to them. Yes. So initially it wasn't an idea to get it published. That all just sort of happened, really.
So for those that don't know, because obviously people are coming to the channel all the time, and thank you very much. And by the way, whilst I'm here, let me just say a big thank you to everybody who is contributing and keeping the channel alive, because we have been demonetized, as you know, so I very much appreciate the support. You've written a book, as I say, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. It pretty much focuses on the theory of Tartaria, and the buildings that we see and the architects that built them, and the free energy that using Tesla coils, as I recall, and all of that. So what got you going on that area to investigate?
It was the pandemic. I mean, I've always been into conspiracy theories from a young age. My dad used to leave books lying around. The first one I read was From Atlantis to the Sphinx. And then I became obsessed with Freemasonry and King Solomon. But really, lockdown, I stumbled across Max Egan, the Australian podcaster and musician. And he was going on about Tartaria, and I'd never heard of this before. So I started doing a bit of digging, and I couldn't find an awful lot on YouTube. So I then discovered BitChute.
Oh, yes.
And
full of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one rabbit hole led to another and another. And it made sense. It made sense to me. So I started researching it more and more. And then I started sharing the information with friends and family. Half of them thought I was absolutely insane. And then I discovered that there were groups of people talking about the same thing on Facebook, and that I wasn't alone. And then I realized other people had written information and had it published. Usually this is on Amazon, because it's very difficult to get when you're talking against the mainstream history narrative. then it's very difficult to get someone to come along and publish it for you. So I just started absorbing the information, and it started to confirm suspicions that I'd had. And the more I researched, the more sense it made. And as your guest John Hamer has said, the falsification of our history is absolutely enormous.
Yes.
And I just dug away and found other things associated with the Tartaria conspiracy, which they claim is the biggest conspiracy of them all. And it opened up a sort of warren. It went from one rabbit hole to
that's the nature of rabbit holes, isn't it? It's just like, oh, blimey, it goes down one, and then you suddenly find a side turning here and a side turning. You don't know which one to go down. A lot of what you talk about is about the reset of 1776. Just remind us what happened then.
So 1776 is a pivotal moment, and anybody that wants to, and some viewers may have one, but otherwise jump on the internet and have a look at the back of the American dollar bill, and you'll see the all-seeing eye above the pyramid in Roman numerals 1776, and then in Latin New World Order.
So even then, but hang on, when was the dollar bill printed that would suggest the New World Order was in 1776?
I don't know how old the dollar bill is as we know it today.
Yes,
but they've marked 1776, and of course the Bible changed in 1775. So
right,
yeah, so 1776, and also the so we're told the creation of the Illuminati, 1776. And so what it would appear is that a 1,000-year reign of an empire called the Tartarians, which some people refer to as the millennial reign of Jesus, that came to an end, and an entire civilization were wiped out. And we saw the introduction of asylums, orphanages, and prisons, and the prison system, followed by a series of wars. Then we had the 1811 Napoleon's comet, and so a lot of fire and flood. And it looks like they literally wiped out a civilization, not only off the face of the earth, but from our history too, and reset.
Back to a new beginning in 1776.
Yeah, the beginning of New World Order.
Now you say that 1,000-year reign of Tartaria. 1,000 years is a very long time, and we've just gone through. I mean, you know, I'm in my 60s now, so 60 years I've seen some changes. My father saw a lot of changes in his life, and he died at 83 or 84 years old. In 1,000 years, I can't imagine how much must have changed in life. The buildings that you often refer to, and you've shown demonstrations, were they there at the very beginning of that era?
No, I think that they evolved. I think that the buildings evolved. I think we have always evolved with regard to technology and technique.
So the Tartarian era wasn't sort of like the same at day one as it was at day 1,000?
No.
Or the year 1,000?
No. I think, as with most civilizations, as with today, as you said earlier on, what you've seen change in 60 years, I think there's always been evolution to a degree. But some of the information I found really interesting was by a Russian professor called Anatoly Fomenko, who looked into the falsification of our timeline. And he suggested, and as did quite a few other Russian scientists and professors that he studied under, that our timeline had been altered. And so in 1776, 1,000 years had been added to buildings by putting a 1 in front of the date it was founded or established, or an M if it was in Roman numerals. But 800 years had been added to our timeline.
Wow.
So we're talking at 1776 of it actually being 976 AD.
And you do, and in your book, I've read the book, and in the book you do have pictures in which you go, and you can go there and look at these buildings, and it'll say 875 now, which obviously missed out that 1 or J that had it on there. What the J is an interesting thing. What do you think that means?
Yeah, so that's the millennial reign of Jesus. So the J represents Jesus. And so it ties in. that's that 1,000 year period of time that they say the Tartarians reigned for, or the Tartarian ideology existed for, which now we would refer to as the Tartarians being Mongolian, the Mongolian Empire. And again, just another way of distorting or changing, falsifying our history. That ties in with it also being referred to as not just the Tartarian Empire or the Tartarian reign, but the millennial reign of Jesus.
So I mean, if we just take that for a moment, the millennial reign, 1,000 years of Jesus, does that mean that Jesus was within that time, or that they were supporting the Christianity version of Jesus from whenever Jesus was supposedly born?
There are two camps with that. Some say that he lived for 1,000 years, for literally getting on for 1,000 years. I think he was born, was it 3 BC, and lived up until 1776 or 976, if 800
if you
years.
take the 800 years.
So he was killed at the end of that period, because it was said that he would reign for 1,000 years. So and that's why a lot of people lean towards the Tartarian period of time being the millennial reign of Jesus. Other people say that he lived for a few hundred years, and then his descendants lived on, and they were removed.
So, well, that I suppose begs the question then, was Jesus in that line? And I don't want to upset anybody who is a Christian and believes in Jesus and what have you, but does that question whether Jesus was the Son of God as portrayed in the Bible?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because lots of people correct that narrative and say that he never actually openly said that. He said that we are all the Son of God. God is within us, and we are within God. And when we die, we go back to the original source where he was sent from. So I don't think, from what I've been reading and from what I've been told and corrected several times about this on social media, that he never claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed that we are all the sons of God.
And where would you suppose that they get that information? I mean, where is the source that tells us any of this?
They're referring to the Bible before the King James Bible, before it was altered.
Right.
So the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, which I believe is still intact, they're saying that actually what we read has been badly translated, information's been missed out, that God used to be plural, and that things have been twisted through, not necessarily some on purpose, but not necessarily all on purpose, just through poor translation. And of course it was written a very long time after we're told Jesus was actually born. So I think that we've been perhaps misled to an extent, and also some things have been lost in translation.
And I suppose when it comes down to it, just playing the devil's advocate, if I can use the word devil in a context like this, is that the Bible's all been written by people, by men and women, or probably men, mostly men, I suppose, and I have no idea. And therefore, how do we know any of it's true?
Well, it's interesting because people have tested over the years. The original works have been tested and found to have traces of psychedelics within the parchment.
Really?
So that opens up a few questions, doesn't it?
Yes.
So how much exaggeration has gone into what's been written?
Mind you, some people do claim that if you take psychedelics or those sort of mind-altering drugs, that you get closer to the source in some way. So maybe they were getting I mean, it is such a minefield. That you mentioned the Bible of 1775. It claims there were 13 months in the year.
Yes.
And so that Bible is later, obviously, than the King James 1611 by 150 years, more or less. I may have got my maths slightly wrong there, but so what was going on in the 1775 Bible?
So they're saying that you're talking there where we changed. We had the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar, and 13 months, and I believe just with regard to that the 13th month, the month that's missing, was Sol, the summer month.
Right.
And that and when they changed the calendar, that April the 1st used to be the start of the year, and that's where April Fool's Day came from. That if you still followed the old calendar, then you were a fool for thinking that the year started on the 1st of April still.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but up until 1775, the Bible contained a lot more of the books. One of the more popular ones that I've actually got at home and read is the Book of Enoch.
Oh, I keep hearing about the Enoch book.
That's worth a read. That
Is
really is, because he actually talks about going up in spaceships, literally in craft, and flying around the planet.
So who was Enoch?
For the life of me, I can't now remember. I've gone completely blank. Yeah, I've completely lost that.
No.
Yeah, sorry.
But so was he? Do you know if he was a connection to Jesus? Was he one of the disciples, or a friend, or a mate, or a bloke down the pub?
No, he wasn't, was he? I don't know. It's gone. It's gone.
Oh, no. Okay. Fair enough.
But Enoch's connected to Noah and Moses, isn't he?
I'm
he? Sure. Yeah.
But it's gone. This is an area where I need to learn a bit more, and I don't mind admitting I'm very ignorant about this.
I read it a long time ago.
Right. And is it publicly available?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon.
I thought it was like a secret.
No.
And is it in easy to read language?
Yeah, it is. And another one that I've been recommended, I've only read a few parts from, and I read it online actually, is the Book of Thomas. And they claim that Thomas was Jesus' brother.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
was Thomas born of an immaculate conception in the way that...
so. Apparently it's his twin brother.
Blimey, there you go.
And that again, another rabbit hole. A lot of people talking about that. Enoch, that will come back to me in a moment.
Yeah,
but it's
we're not talking about Enoch Powell, are we?
No, absolutely not.
He made some predictions that. Anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. So no, that's very interesting, because the 1775 one with the 13 months, when you look at the like September, that it would be the 7th month in that, and October would have been the 8th month.
Line up.
And that does make sense, doesn't it, as we understand those words' meanings.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But what happened then in 1776? Did they reverse it?
Well, they said that they changed the Bible. Sorry, I beg your pardon. They changed the calendar because it was affecting the leap years and the cycle of Easter. But that doesn't really make any sense, does it? Because we still have
Easter,
and we have leap years, and of course Easter Sunday. We're very specific about December the 25th.
Yes,
recognising that as Jesus' birthday, even though he was born on the 11th of September, 9/11, to Americanise it. Quite a famous date, isn't it? 9/11. They say that. We need to stick by Jesus, or recognising Jesus' birth. And I'm not religious, by the way. It's just the more I've delved into Tartarian, the more rabbit holes I've gone down, the more I'm starting to believe a lot more in that book.
They're
vague on Easter, aren't they?
Easter's they're always vague, because it's something to do with something to do with the second moon in the Sunday of the last week of whenever it is, when the something shines.
Whenever it is, but we're very specific on his birth. But with his death, we can.
Somebody's going to tell me, of course, exactly why it is that way.
Absolutely.
I'm absolutely certain in the comments. But so the 1611, the King James version of the Bible, presumably that had 13 months in it. So why is it 1775 is the one that they always say, but if you look in the 1775 one, it has 13 months, and yet most people will know the King James version, and
we've grown up with.
Yeah, and they're not sort of going, but that one has 13 months in it as well.
And very hard to get hold of an earlier Bible.
Earlier than 1611.
Yeah, I mean, where would you even go to look for one of those? And you imagine if you stumbled across one, I imagine there are private libraries that have that would have one, but it's not something that we can easily access.
No.
Even a copy, I can't even find a copy of it.
Right. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, we had on the show Christopher Sparks, who went back to, I think it was the Hebrew version, or may not be in Hebrew, maybe in another language, whatever the original. I can't always remember all of this. Trying to remember all these different conspiracy theories is a bit of a nightmare. And he translated it, and he said he put them in the correct order, because the King James Bible was in the wrong order. But who says that there's any set order? I suppose. And then there were books that weren't in it, he put in it. So I don't know if Enoch's in there. I'll have to have a look on the one on my shelf.
And there's the Book of Giants, the Book of Jesus as well.
The Book of Giants.
Yeah, the Book of Giants.
So that opens up another can of worms, doesn't it? Tell us about the giants, because I think you said in your book that some of the doors in the big buildings and the windows and the position of the windows give the impression that people would have been much taller, at least.
Yeah, and I also think not just that, but also if you look at the size of the ceilings when you go into these rooms, if you think about it, it wasn't. If we believe everything we've been told about how we've developed heating, from literally having a coal fire to having central heating and now solar, it would be very difficult to heat a room with a very high ceiling if hot air rising. And so why would you have such high ceilings which in these grand buildings that would make it impossible to heat efficiently, if at all? And the large doorways and windows, and you'll often see this in churches, that some old buildings and churches in particular, the windows are so high up that you can't actually see out of. And some people will argue, well, they're just to bring light in. But most windows serve two purposes, don't they? You actually do want to be able to look out of them, and the window sill's too high to even get to. So part of the Tartarian, if you like, school of thought is that giants built these buildings, certainly giants by our standard. But if you I don't like to use the word Google, but we're all used to saying Google it. If you check the height of Noah, I mean, that varies from 12 to 20 feet. That it's claimed.
And where would those references be to say that?
They're saying that actually comes from old text.
Right.
Old text stating that these people were a lot taller. So up until the end of the Tartarian Empire, up until 1776, as we know the date to be, the average height was about 12 feet tall.
So we're all midgets then, in that world.
But if you look at some of the doors on old buildings, they don't. There's no logical reason to have a door that height.
But when you look at doors that height, the doors are in proportion to doors that we have. So what I'm saying is, they're not tall, thin doors.
No.
They're sort of like the same doors, but just bigger. Which means they would be much wider as well then. Is that
absolutely. They would be in proportion to us, so they wouldn't just go up, they would go out too, to be in proportion.
So they're just not lanky people.
No, literally giants. And you know, we're not talking about a disorder, giantism. We're actually talking these people were taller. And that's commonly accepted by people that have studied the Bible.
And yet these tall giant people were getting into airships and things.
Apparently so, yeah. But inside the airship, because we all believe that we sat in the carriage underneath, but there's a lot of evidence out there to say that we're actually inside the airship itself.
I suppose in this 21st century, in the whatever realm that we're in at the moment, it's all very hard to sort of get an angle on this. But we do see on there's plenty of people out there who've got videos where they're looking down on Google Maps and seeing these what look like circuit boards but old cities. And this pattern of buildings is all round the world, which would be strange if it was only a Western phenomena.
Yeah, there's interestingly enough, there's an old site. I believe it's in Portugal, and if you Google Earth it looks like the Star Wars Millennium Falcon. And I think there are a lot of things that they've found in the rainforest, something that looks like the space shuttle attached to the rocket, the rockets. And
was that found after we designed those things?
Sorry.
That's all right. Because I mean, very often people can say, "Oh, look at this ancient thing. It looks like something in a motion picture film or something." But actually, it'd be just as easy for somebody in the motion picture film to find that and go, I'm going to design, that's a nice design, I'll design that. And people make the mistake that the motion picture thing came first, when obviously the ancient thing came first.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. The site in Portugal is very, very old. Hundreds, if not thousands of years old. As for the sort of rock what looks like it actually looks like a petrified space shuttle and rockets that's actually got the tanks attached to it. But how old that is, I don't know.
And I mean, I'm again just playing the devil's advocate, because we're in modern times we're told what a rocket will look like. But maybe it's possible that we've only designed those rockets because they actually look like something that has been discovered and seen in the past, rather than in the past somehow having a weird connection to what we have today.
So, to a certain extent, reverse engineering.
Well, no, it's just that we've been inspired by that and going, oh, we could make rockets that look like that. So, in other words, I was once talking to a chap about making a film. And he said he wanted to make a film about this guy who had died. And he was thinking, we need to get a film, where a shot. He had no money. So he wanted to get a shot of the graveyard of the bloke looking. And he said, it would cost a lot of money to have a tombstone set up. And I, quick as a flash, said, well, why don't you film a tombstone that already exists, use that name, and then fashion your film around that. And he went, oh, I don't know why I didn't think of that. And that's where I was thinking, maybe, some people have gone, oh, they look like they could be a good design for a flying machine. And in the 21st century, lo and behold, we're designing something that looks like something in the past, rather than I'm just being devil's advocate.
No, you're
here,
quite right.
Rather than going, oh, isn't it strange, rockets, we know rockets to look like this and they had them then, but maybe we're only being inspired by what may not have been a rocket, is what I'm trying to get to.
Absolutely. But then I suppose if you follow that train of thought through, then you'd be looking at something that didn't look like, it doesn't look like anything that you'd recognise, because if the space shuttle at that point hadn't been built, then what you're looking at there'd be no recognition. You wouldn't be able to relate.
Yes, but that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, what an interesting shape. You could maybe build a rocket. Maybe we could build something that flew up using that shape. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's quite possible.
I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no. So I guess on that basis, then we would have to assume that someone from NASA or someone connected to NASA, or the deep state, if you like, are aware of these sites.
Well, I imagine that people who are designing things look at all sorts of pictures and patterns. As you would if you're researching a book on something, you might read all round the subject. If you're interested in shapes and you're thinking, what's aerodynamic? Oh, there's that thing back in prehistoric times. That's quite aerodynamic. Actually, that would be quite good. I quite like that bulbous shape, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's just an idea. So let me ask you, change the tack on this. Are you writing something next? What's your next project?
Well, yes, but I'm stuck. I've got to say, I'm stuck. I keep asking people that have read the first book they'll say, are you going to write a second? When will it be available? So I'm starting to ask them, which was your favourite chapter? What would you like me to expand upon? And I got a really strange... I sent a copy to my dad, who lives out in Portugal. And I got a really strange reply from him. He said that you've given little nuggets of information in each chapter. Why didn't you expand more? And then as I started to reply to him, I got another message come through, and he said, unless, of course, you're planning on bringing out a series of books that goes into more depth on each chapter, which is exactly what I'm planning to do. But my first thoughts were to do an A to Z of Tartarian cities. So no matter where in the world you are, or if you're travelling, you can actually find one of these buildings and look for yourself at the things I'm pointing out, and perhaps do a little bit of research. And you might find that the person they said designed this building would have been 5 years old when it was constructed.
Which is very strange, isn't it? Because you do say that in your book. You mention certain architects, and you say, well, if he really did it, he would have been too young to hold a pencil type thing.
Yeah.
And you think, surely they must have known that when they were writing the history of it, or making it up and saying, well, we better think of somebody. And nobody seems to have actually gone and said, well, you do realise he was only 5, if he even existed.
There's a channel on YouTube called My Lunch Break, and each day he puts about a 10, 11-minute podcast out there where he finds one building and he literally takes the whole narrative apart, and that's what he does. It's all to do with the architecture. But what I found, just as an example, was that sometimes it's not the building that you're looking at that gives it away. So let's say, for example, we look at Westminster Palace, the Houses of Parliament. Let's just take that as an example. And they might claim that a particular person was the architect and another particular person was the builder. And that all stacks up. And then they'll give you a load of references on other buildings that the same architect designed. And it's usually there where they slip up. They'll give them anything up to 30 different buildings. They'll give them the credit for having designed those as well. And it will be one or two of those that you'll pick out, and they'll be either a toddler or not even born at that point. And they did it with the first government building in Sydney. And they said that that the person that they claim was the architect, well, he was a convict, and he was actually on his way to Australia at the time it was being built. He hadn't even arrived.
Good God!
And he arrived as a convict.
Yes.
And instantly he's given the head of the head architect role, and assisted by a military person with no architectural background whatsoever.
Yes.
And so sometimes they mess up, and I think there are too many buildings around the world for them to not do that.
To not do that, no, absolutely. So an A to Z of what makes a Tartarian building. If you're looking at one, what would you say that is a classic Tartarian building?
Typically, you would say the Greco-Roman style, but also they're recognised by what we call mud flood windows, and these are the windows that if you walk past an old building, there's a bit of a window poking up from the street, from actually the pavement, and they'll be dismissed as being a cellar, and that window is to actually put light in. But having actually rented a building that had mud flood windows, when I spoke to the landlord who'd owned the building a long time and had all the history on it, he said that there'd been a fire. There'd been a huge fire, and what they'd done is they'd pushed all of the rubble and debris into the street and then built over it, so everybody's ground floor became a basement. And they refer to those as mud flood windows.
Why the mud flood? Was mud flooding?
Yeah, quite literally. In a lot of places around the world, there were quite serious floods and quakes and fires. And the strange thing is, it's in almost every major town and city in the world from around 1776 up until the 1900s. They all at some point experienced fire or flood, resulting in a lot of buildings being damaged. This happened perhaps more so in America.
Right.
A lot of cities were devastated, and these ranged from quakes causing a lot of destruction to actual floods, and in some cases it was the snow, the ice melt, happening at such an incredible speed and velocity that it turned into mud and solidified, and then people were digging houses out of the mud.
Gosh, that sounds awful, doesn't it? You're, if I've got this right, you're quite dubious about the history before 1776. I mean, and when I say that, I mean, I mean, we've had a conversation over the last sort of 6 months or so, where I've put it to you, but people have been writing diaries, there's evidence of letters, there's communications, maps, postcards and things, with people writing to each other and talking about events and things in history. But you're dubious about those things have actually happened, am I right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of information that's been put out there for us to stumble across to back up the narrative on our history.
Don't you think there's a hell of a lot of work for people to have put out there just to confuse us, and why would they want to do that?
I think it's the same reason that they would want to change what we eat and change the sky and change the weather. I think that there is nothing that they won't do. There's no length that they will not go to wipe out our history, to program us, to make us ill, to deny us of who we really are, what we're capable of, what we're really here for. And I think that's been going on for a very long time, and I think that they're more than capable of doing that. There's also conspiracies around, for example, Leonardo da Vinci. Some people claim that actually that was a family of people and not just one person. And then some people will say that Shakespeare didn't exist and that was actually a series of works written by a group of people. So it's very difficult to tell, but I do think there's a lot of information that's been put out there and a lot of work that's gone into falsifying our history and denying.
I mean, I do get that you could say certain people like Shakespeare wasn't Shakespeare, it was written by a committee or something like that. But when it's an individual, I mean, there are people who've got letters written in, say, 1601, or family or notes that they've dug up from various places. Say, talking about the English Civil War, it may be just, say, a receipt for some butter or for some cheese or something like that. And you're saying, well, no, all that's a lie because it didn't exist.
I'm saying that it's possible that,
but there must be millions of those tiny little bits of evidence, and whilst all things are possible, I grant you that all things are possible, but it just seems a lot of work for people to go to quell that people may never have even found. You know, the odd receipt in an old accounts book somewhere that dates to 1621 before the 1776. Do you never question that at all?
No, because well, first of all, I've been trying to find myself somebody that has this sort of information, somebody that has an old diary, and we've spoken before about old newspapers, and I've spent the last 3 or 4 years trying to find something like that. Not someone who says they've got something, but actually to physically see it and then find a way of independently getting it tested to see how old it actually is. Because with all of the research and all of the work that's gone into looking down the Tartarian rabbit hole, no one has come across anything to substantiate that yet. I've heard it several times, but I've never actually seen anything.
So, but I suppose other people might argue and say, well, how can you substantiate that this 1776 thing happened? It's a lot of circumstantial evidence of Cabbage Patch Kids and stuff, but of course there's nobody there to say, I was there, I saw it happen. Or accounts. Are there accounts of people saying the mud floods have come along and, oh my God, what are we going to do? That sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, what I've done in my book, and what I actually do even when I post something, is I've always said that this is my opinion.
Yes.
That, and I've asked people to disprove it, because I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm saying that this is what I believe.
Yes.
And I'm quite happy for someone to prove one way or another, but that I'm either right or I'm wrong, and I'm quite happy to be wrong. But what I tend to come up against is people saying that that I'm wrong without actually being able to substantiate it. Like I've talked about with yourself, I've talked about, did Nikola Tesla exist? Did Napoleon actually really exist? I never said they didn't, but it's difficult for anybody to provide information to prove that. And I know it's a side issue and I'm digressing slightly, but with regard to Nikola Tesla, I keep asking all the people that tell me, of course he existed, he did this and this. And I just say, can you show me a link to a video?
Or an old
movie with him in, because there's plenty of Einstein. And this man was at the forefront of technology. You'd think there'd be something out there. So
but then the counter argument to that is, if they want you to really believe he existed, wouldn't they have created the footage to show you that he existed?
Quite possibly, but I don't think it's been questioned until recently. And also you've got the point where
but then there's loads and loads of books about Wellington, and you've questioned whether Wellington existed, and yet they've made damn sure that most people believe that Wellington did exist because of all the bits of evidence or so-called evidence and what have you. But then with Tesla, who had some very radical ideas and health-changing machines, why would they not have wanted the same amount of evidence that he did exist? If he did, if I was Mr. McNasty going, I want people to believe it, I would have made damn sure, if I had the technology, which presumably they had with all these others, to have made sure that he did it. He did look like he had existed.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, we it would be impossible in theory to find anything to prove that Wellington did or did not exist. But I think it's more severe with someone like Tesla, because we had the capability to record footage then, and there isn't any. So whether or not Wellington and Napoleon existed, that's open to debate. But Tesla is a little bit more unusual in that he was around. There are photographs of him, but they tend to be the same ones we only ever see. Actually, a lot of the time, the one I used on the front cover, we tend to see just the same photos. One of him sat sideways on, middle-aged, and then another one towards the end of his life. There's nothing in between that. Having all of these newspaper articles, lectures, awards, patents, and so on, there's nothing. So it's just that's the only reason I question Tesla, is because the lack of photographs and video or movie or whatever you want to call it, footage of him at a time in which it was an exciting new
So why
development.
what's trying to formulate in my mind then is, why would they want you to think that he does exist if there's no evidence to show that he does?
Why do they want people to think Tesla had existed? I think
Because it would have been more advantage if he didn't exist, because of the free energy and all the wonderful things that he had, wouldn't it?
Well, of course, they don't want us to have free energy.
No, I know, but that's my whole point. Surely they don't want you to think he did exist, because then, if by knowing he existed, we would know of the free energy and the Tesla coil. Surely it's in their interest that we don't know he exists.
Well, what I believe has happened is that the technology that Tesla was working on, that we're told that he patented, that was all Tartarian technology, what they call antiquitech. This had been around for a long time, and I think that they'd given one particular person the credit for having thought, and the way in which he came up with these inventions is interesting, because he claimed to never write anything down. They came to him in visions. So by giving one person the credit for all of these different inventions, then there's no longer a need to say, or an admittance to say that actually they were using energy harnessing equipment that actually was working with the ether for a very, very long time. They can say, oh, this mad scientist from Serbia came up with this and it didn't work and he went bust, and things moved on.
So they used him to demystify the free energy and make it sound like bunkum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't going to work, and
yet here we are still all searching for those same things.
Yeah.
And some people have found it, of course. Some people have found free energy machines, although they have mysteriously died younger than they perhaps ought to have died.
Yeah, there's been quite a few, haven't there?
Yeah.
I listed them in the book, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and how they met an unusual demise, yeah.
Vested interests might have been the reason for that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Just theorising.
It's very possible, isn't it, that there was some element of greed that might have been connected to that.
It is a murky old world, isn't it? Because you're trying to pinpoint things that are real and not real, and in the end, does it come down to personal belief?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I'm quite cynical now. I've been looking into conspiracy theories for, as I said earlier on, for a very long time, and the pandemic really being locked down. I didn't work for 9 months. I wasn't allowed to return to work. I stayed down the rabbit hole for a solid 9 months. But the problem is I didn't really come back out of it. So now, as soon as I watch the news, which I try not to do, and I hear of an event, my immediate thought is this is either not true or it's a distraction. And someone once said to me that if ever you're watching the news or you're reading a paper and they don't mention Mr. Gates, to take a bloody good look at what Mr. Gates is up to.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so that's where I've become. I've become so cynical now that I just think I'm starting to think almost everything is done to conspire against us, whether it's what we eat, what we've been taught at school, and what we watch on TV. Are we being programmed and so on? So, I think that I'm so far down a rabbit hole, Richard, that I can't get back out.
So, I mean, if I was one of these so-called elites that are in control, or one of these incredibly knowledgeable, whatever they are, aliens or humans or whatever we're told that they all are, and I knew that perhaps say 90% of the population were as thick as anything, thick as a plank, and they'll go along with what we say in mainstream media. You'd be aware that 10% of those wouldn't. So they're going to be awake and trying to find out the answer. So you would think, okay, I don't want them to find out the answer because they're obviously the bright sparks. So we need to send them down rabbit holes which don't exist, have no bearing on anything, but keep them busy. Do you think that's going on?
Yeah, absolutely.
And have you worked out which of the rabbit holes are the ones which actually lead nowhere and which ones might lead back to those big nasty people?
I think there are a few, and I think one we were discussing earlier on, there's the whole flat Earth, globe Earth. I think that's been put out there, a sort of psyops. I think that Antarctica, what's going on in Antarctica? The moon, has anybody been to the dark side of the moon? Is that some people say the moon's just a hologram or a reflection of our planet? The firmament, who were the Anunnaki? I think and the Anunnaki, we're seeing more and more and more about them now.
And is that? Do you think that's a load of nonsense that's been set up for us?
I don't actually. With regard to the Anunnaki, I don't. But I think that if we start looking at, as we were talking earlier on, is the world that we live on flat or is it a globe? We just don't know. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as you quite rightly said, what difference does it make? So I think we're given rabbit holes to go down, to stay down, that are misdirection.
And is Tartaria then one of those rabbit holes?
Some people will say, yes, it is. Absolutely. There are a lot of people that would say that it's just another rabbit hole. But it wasn't until I started researching it and started going on to, as much as I don't particularly like the platform, I started going on to Facebook to see if there are other people talking about it, that I realised that I interact with a few groups that represent over 1 million people just on Facebook talking about the same thing. And each time I put something out there, I'm getting lots of feedback from people saying, other group members saying, you found that as well, I found this. And then we start talking privately and we're sharing more and more information. I had no idea how many people are looking into this, but whether or not we've been sent down
that's the thing, isn't it? If it becomes
path.
slightly popular with a million odd people, is that deliberate?
Yeah, there is always that. And I do always have a little doubt in my mind with everything that I look into. Whether it's not just Tartaria, but cloning Antarctica, flat Earth, spherical Earth. I do that with everything. Because you do question yourself. You're given so much information. As you are, you're bombarded with it.
I know, it's a nightmare. I don't know what to think these days. And that's why you ask the questions and you assimilate. And one day you think this, and the next day you think, no, that can't possibly be, surely. And then ultimately you come back to, I'm alive now, here and now, at this moment in time. This is what's affecting my life. These are the things. Is that really going to change things?
Well, I think with regard to, let's say we find out that the Antarctica is an iced wall, that it isn't actually, we don't have a north and a south pole, it is a flat plane, and there's an ice wall around it. Well, if that turns out to be true, then people are going to start to question, the public, the masses are going to start questioning everything else they've been taught. And then when they start to understand that most of what they've been taught is a lie, then the people that are making these lies up and changing our narrative and ultimately doing lots of things to our detriment are going to lose more and more power. And I think that the more we can show people what's going on and what's gone on, the more chance we have of overthrowing and stopping the people responsible. And they say, don't they, that if you can control someone's past, you can control their future. If you deny someone of their history, then you've really got total control over them. And I think if we can show people that's happened and that the history's been falsified, then we stand a better chance of getting these people to stop believing what they're being told today. If everything up until this point's been a lie, then what reason would you have to believe anything that comes out of the mainstream news narrative from this point on? And it could lead to a change in education and what our children are being taught, and it could be an end to the apparent democracy that we currently have, and perhaps things could be changed for the better if you can get just an ordinary member of the public to accept and understand and agree that we've been lied to since the beginning of time. Then they're not going to perhaps take any more of it, and maybe we'll all unite and stand up and change
And
things.
who doesn't want that, ladies and gentlemen? Who indeed? My guest has been Guy Anderson. He has written this rather remarkable book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, which is available on Amazon.
It is indeed.
And if they go to you direct, can they still get copies?
Yeah, they can get a signed copy.
copies?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll put all the links in the description. Thank you for coming in and telling us about this. For some people, it's highly unbelievable. For some people, it's absolutely believable. The evidence is all around. I'm trying to stay as open-minded on all these different topics that I talk about, and the ones that, ultimately it comes down to what resonates with you. But never discard anything, I would say.
Yeah.
Because you just never know, do you?
No, you
You
don't.
never know. And hopefully one day we will know.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. Anyway, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed that little discussion down the rabbit hole with my guest, Guy Anderson. Thank you, Guy.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice to see you here in the studio for the first... What do you think?
Yeah, it's lovely to be. Having seen it for years, it's nice to actually be in it. It's quite surreal, actually.
It's quite cold, though, at the same time.
It is a
'cause
little
there's
bit
no
chilly.
heating in here,
Yeah.
so we're going to go off and warm up by the fire, which I suggest if you're in the cold and you can do it, because we all want to be warm, don't we? I will be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests, but in the meantime, from Guy and myself, thank you so much for watching. Till next time, goodbye.